If you're in a relationship with a narcissist, a partner, a family member, someone you deeply care about, you've probably asked yourself some version of this. Why does this feel so hard when neither of us is trying to hurt the other? Why do conversations loop even after we talk them through? Why do needs keep going unmet even when there's effort on both sides? Today, I want to talk about what actually makes relationships with a narcissist sustainable. Not in theory, not in advice list format, but in the way it really works inside the nervous system. And I want to share this from the inside as someone who is the narcissist in these dynamics. Most people don't enter relationships with a narcissist thinking, this is going to be confusing and exhausting. They enter thinking, if we care enough, we'll figure it out. And at first, that seems true. There's connection, there's intensity, there's meaning. Sometimes there's even a sense of being deeply understood, at least intellectually. But over time, something starts to feel off. Conversations loop, needs go unmet, misunderstandings pile up, and no matter how many times you talk about it, nothing really sticks. One person starts feeling emotionally alone, the other feels constantly criticized or blindsided. And both people quietly ask themselves, why is this so hard when neither of us is trying to hurt the other? Here's the part that almost never gets talked about. Most of the pain in these relationships doesn't come from malice. It comes from two nervous systems playing completely different games, while assuming they're playing the same one. One person expects emotional awareness to happen organically. The other experiences emotional awareness as something that has to be accessed intentionally. One person experiences unmet needs as neglect. The other experiences the same moment as an unexpected demand. And without realizing it, both people start fighting the effects instead of understanding the mechanism underneath. That's what this video is really about. Not fixing anyone, not blaming anyone, but understanding why the usual relationship rules stop working here and what actually gives these relationships a real chance to stabilize. Because once you see where the disconnect begins, the solutions stop feeling forced and start feeling possible. And once you understand this part, the exact place where the disconnect actually starts, everything that usually feels chaotic in these relationships suddenly becomes predictable. Not easy, but understandable. And that's where real change becomes possible. Let me show you what I mean. There's a moment in these relationships where care itself starts to feel pressured. Not because you don't want to care, but because the way care is expected doesn't match how your system works. For me, one of the most uncomfortable realizations was this. I felt pressure around caring because it wasn't spontaneous. There was a belief quietly running in the background. If someone has to tell you what they need and when they need it, then doing it somehow means less. Like real care was supposed to appear naturally, organically at the right moment, and if it didn't, that meant something was wrong with me. So when the idea of intentionally setting aside time to check in emotionally came up, even suggesting it felt awkward, almost fake, like I was admitting failure, like I was saying I can't do this the normal way. And that brought up shame, because in my mind, needing structure around care felt the same as being told, here's how to be a human. What I didn't understand yet was this: the discomfort wasn't about structure, it was about the meaning I attached to it. I wasn't resisting the act, I was resisting the implication. The implication that I needed help doing something others seemed to do automatically. And as long as I saw structure as proof of deficiency, any intentional form of connection was going to feel forced. Only later did I realize something critical. Spontaneity isn't what makes care meaningful, reliability does. And once that clicked, the awkwardness began to soften. Not all at once, but enough to keep going. And this is really one of the important first steps in relationships when you're the narcissist, is having scheduled check-in times for emotional conversations. For most of my life, there was one move I went to automatically when emotions showed up: problem solving. Someone would start expressing something painful, frustration, hurt, feeling unseen, and almost instantly my mind would shift gears, analyze, reframe, explain, offer strategy, lay out steps. From the inside, it felt helpful, clean, efficient, but it worked especially well at one thing: ending the conversation before it went somewhere emotionally uncertain. What I didn't see at the time was that this wasn't support, it was actually threat management. Emotional expression registers in my nervous system as unpredictable, and unpredictability reads as danger. So problem solving became a way to stabilize the situation, to close the loop, to regain control. The hard part was realizing this after the fact, because later I'd notice a shift in the other person. They felt unheard or dismissed or strangely alone, even though I had just given them solutions. That used to confuse me because from my side, I had engaged fully. But eventually, I had to face something uncomfortable. I wasn't responding to them, I was responding to my own need for the emotion to stop. Once I saw that pattern clearly, I understood something essential. My instinct to fix wasn't about intelligence or care, it was about safety. And until I learned to stay present without needing to resolve, connection would always break at the same place. One thing I want to pause and name here: I don't think I would have ever seen these patterns this clearly if I'd been trying to do it completely on my own. The level of self awareness I'm talking about here didn't come from inside alone, it came from being in spaces with other people who are also willing to look honestly at themselves. People who could reflect things back to me that I literally couldn't see from the inside. Trying to unwind this stuff in isolation is incredibly hard, especially when your nervous system is designed to normalize and protect the patterns. That's actually why I created my free online Awake Narcissist group. Not as a place to fix anyone or label anyone, but as a space for people who are waking up inside these patterns to not have to do it alone. If this is landing for you and you want a place to explore it with others who really get it, the link is in the description. No pressure, just an open door. The biggest shift didn't come from insight, it came from noticing my body. There's a very specific moment when my system starts to shut down. My eyesight narrows, my breath gets shallow, my shoulders get tense. My whole body reacts like we're about to need to move fast, fight, run, escape. It's not subtle, it's primal. And once I learned to recognize those cues, I saw something clearly. I wasn't choosing to disengage, my nervous system had already done it. Long before words, long before thoughts, long before intention. This is why emotional conversations can feel impossible in the moment. Not because of unwillingness, but because the body has already decided this isn't safe. And here's the part that most people miss: you can't reason your way out of a physiological response. You have to slow it, name it, create enough safety for presence to return. Until I understood that, I kept judging myself for reactions that were happening before I was conscious of them. Once I learned to recognize those signals early, the narrowing vision, the tightening chest, the shallow breath, everything changed. Not because I suddenly became emotional, but because I finally knew when I was about to disappear. Only after seeing all of this clearly did I realize these weren't random failures, they were patterns. And once you understand the patterns, you can finally work with them instead of fighting them. That's where sustainability actually begins in relationship. If this conversation feels like it's finally putting words to something you've lived with for a long time, you don't have to carry that awareness alone. My free online Awake Narcissist community I mentioned is where we explore these patterns slowly, honestly, and without performance. Not to fix anyone, but to understand ourselves well enough to stop repeating the same painful loops. The link is in the description. Join when it feels right.